transforming innovations. We're so excited to have you on this journey. So let's dive in. All right, we are doing this. Welcome to our first ever Tern Flight Path podcast, where we are going to be talking about all things R&D, research and development here at Tern. We've got a fun first show here. We're going to keep this kind of under the radar because this is our first time figuring out how this all works. But my name is David, CEO and one of the co-founders here at Tern. I'm going to be your host and moderator here, and I've got two absolutely incredible guests. Or I should say co-hosts, because it's going to be the three of us every week talking about this stuff. So we'll have them introduce themselves, starting with Molly.
Hi, everyone. I'm Molly. I lead product here at Tern. And for those of you who don't know, as a product manager or product lead, what I really work on is figuring out what we should build, when we should build it, how it should work, and then how to really launch it to our users in a way that will make them successful. So that means I spend about a quarter of my time actually talking to our users and advisors pretty much daily. I spend a lot of my time actually figuring out the ordering that we're going to build things in and the prioritization for those things. And then I work really closely with Brad and our wonderful engineering team on how these things should work. And then I do a lot of testing and help center documentation to make sure when we're releasing these things, they meet your needs. So I'm excited to talk about our process today. Awesome.
And Brad, over to you.
Amazing. I'm Brad, lead the design side of things here at Tern, and helped Molly with a lot of the things she covered, talking about things like user research and talking to customers to make sure we understand what we're building and really starting to get into how we should be building it. So on the design side, we really want to make sure that when we build a new feature for you, we're thinking about the right way for that thing to work, not just like generally the problems we need to solve, but the way we should solve them so that they're easy for you to use, that they make sense within your workflows, and then also hopefully are easy to learn and to make sure that both you and if you're an agency, like all of your agents are able to really power their workflows with the stuff we're building. So really excited to be here.
And because this is our first episode, and it's like, I think folks are maybe kind of wrapping their head a little around how does the Tern research and development organization actually work? You both said a little bit about this, Molly kind of thinking about the roadmap and the prioritization, Brad thinking about the design and how do these things actually work. But anything else you can share around just what it looks like to be a part of the kind of R&D organization and how these different groups work together?
Gosh, well, first of all, it's a lot of fun. We have a tiny team. So the R&D team is literally me and Brad and 5 engineers. And we've actually worked in a past life with basically everyone. So that's really fun. We worked for a long time in another company all together and really got to see that company scale. And really what this looks like on our calendars, Brad and I are talking to people live, our users, a few times a day normally, or we're in the Facebook community or we're in the support queue, just really digesting feedback. And then we have daily meetings with our engineering team to talk about upcoming projects. I'll often outline why we're doing a project, what we're hoping to accomplish. The various kind of user journey of what different stages that the project really needs to meet in terms of their workflows and what they're trying to accomplish. Brad, depending on where we're at in the phase of the product, will go into our design tool and actually show screens of how it should look. The engineer who's actually working on the project will talk about the architecture and the code and really how we're planning on building it. And we'll all give feedback. We'll all kind of make sure it makes sense for what we understand from our users and the goals of what we're trying to accomplish and how we're planning on building it and making sure that, we can get it small enough that, hopefully, as you've seen, we can ship these things weekly. That's really our goal. We want to be shipping high value things every single week. And so to do that, we have to execute really well as a team to make sure they work well, but they're also as small and easy and fast to build as possible. So just a lot of tight communication and collaboration. When we're not in meetings, we're slacking each other 500 times a day, or our tool that we use to communicate.
And so much that Molly mentioned there around we when I'm out kind of talking to folks at conferences, the thing that surprises people about Tern, I think the most, is like how we come from a tech background, but not a travel background. And yet we've learned this industry in, I think, a pretty granular way, in a way that blows people's minds, right? And being able to not only build that quickly, but build the right things in the right order. And I think, like Molly was alluding to, and Brad in the intro too, like so much of that is because we just spend so much of our days talking to users, talking to advisors, talking to everybody in there. Brad, maybe over to you on kind of your side. Anything you want to add to that? And also kind of just curious, like, what's your week looked like this week? We're recording this on a Friday, like just kind of looking back this week, like what does that actually kind of looked like this week for you?
Yeah, let's start with just the general, like, what does the design process look like? So as Molly was mentioning, she's doing a lot of the really early work to make sure we know like what order we should be building things in, generally the problems we need to be solving, a little bit of how we should be doing that. Often that comes with some documentation. That's like, here are the requirements that we think we need to hit in order to really make this useful for advisors and for other customers. And from that set of documentation, we start to turn that into visuals to try to get a feel for like, what should the actual experience be for you when you log into Tern to see what this looks like. And if you're in my brain or on my computer, what that looks like is not just like one screen. It's like, oh, this is obviously, how it should be built, but rather like a bunch of explorations of all sorts of different ways we could address it, different ways we could lay out things, different information we could show in different places. And a lot of my job is like trying all those things, evaluating them and saying, oh yeah, this is right. This is what's really going to work for customers. Sometimes even taking those mocks and early screens and sharing them with some of our, some people who've expressed interest in a feature already, like our early beta testers, getting their early reactions to make sure we really got it before we actually start building it and implementing the pieces. So this week we've been doing a lot of that. We have 2 big projects in flight that are starting kind of from scratch. So at the same time that we're trying to nail down exactly the requirements of a feature, we're starting to mock those things up and say like, oh yeah, how do the pieces fit together? What maybe did we miss early on in those requirements? How do we think about this piece or that? So we're doing that for 2 different projects, and at the same time launching new features, getting assets ready for those launches, and then reacting to feedback that's coming in. Just always, we want to make sure that we're very responsive to things that are coming up that aren't core to our roadmap. And so my week has been like balancing the new projects on top of some reacting to some things we've already shipped that we need to make quick changes to, and then also listening to customer calls, already thinking about groups, which is still months away on the roadmap, but a lot of balancing all of the things that are on our mind and that we want to make sure that we're delivering on today and in the future.
We mentioned some key words there. I think a lot of people's ears are going to perk up when they say looking at groups. So a little plug for our this is the podcast, our webinar that we're going to have in August. We'll do a little bit of a preview for groups, but you'll learn a lot more about it then, and then we'll be launching it later this year. Let's jump into what we've shipped. I mean, I think one of the really cool things about Tern, and certainly I think one of the things we're all really proud of, is just how quickly we move and how we're shipping something literally every single week. One of the reasons we wanted to start this podcast was because we realized that we are shipping things so quickly that sometimes it can be easy to miss them if you're a Tern user. And sometimes it can be easy to understand, like to miss, like, why are we building a feature? So this segment we're calling What We Shipped. We may iterate on that over time to make it more fun. We'll see. You can see Brad being like, yeah, we'll work on that.
Very creative.
Very creative, exactly. You can tell. It's the key marketing title. But I think what we'll kind of dig into is we made a change, and again, we should maybe have a better feature name, but it's a new way of structuring lodging on the board and on the itinerary. This is something I know that came from a ton of user feedback over the past many months. And Brad, you've got, I think, a little bit of a history with this feature, right? Do you want to kind of bring that to life for us?
Yeah. Yeah, as David mentioned, this feature and I go way back to my very first week at Tern. So last December when I joined, I was like just still getting up to speed of like how all the travel industry works, all these concepts. And Molly at the same time was like, hey, we've had this request around like just showing lodging like for a hotel or something, like check-in and check-out on the itinerary. Right now we just have one way of showing it. Be cool if we could have like the check-in and check-out time. It's like, oh, easy. First week, I can get this done. Had a lot to learn about how Tern works behind the scenes and why that's not as simple as just adding another box on the screen for a checkout time, but actually, started working on this way back in December, and we had some early designs there that we felt good about, but the project just, based on all of your feedback, wasn't actually the most important thing at that time. So even though I got to work on it really as like a project my first week, we're just now getting around to we just did ship it this week, which is pretty exciting. And there's some additional follow-up pieces to come soon around flights. But it's been fun to both be able to like think about this for that period of time, but then also to recognize that like, even though I'm excited about a feature, it doesn't always mean it's the most important thing for everyone who's using it today. And we try to make sure we get that prioritization right so it lands at the right time.
And Molly, I want to hear from your perspective on, and Brad, you alluded to this, right? Which is like, this is actually like way more complicated than it seems. But just in case we've got some listeners who aren't in the product, they don't, just to bring to life how it used to work in Tern is you would drag a lodging element over to the board. It would represent a hotel, or it could be a cruise cabin, whatever that may be. And it would show up on the itinerary, would show up on the board that we use to lay out trips, or advisors use to lay out trips in Tern. And it would show up on the first day of that lodging activity. It would then not show up. You'd see kind of this bar that shows you how long the activity lasts, but there would be nothing on the itinerary to indicate, hey, this is checkout, this is the checkout time. And so it seems very easy to just say like, oh, like we'll just add another tile on the board for checkout. But as we started to poke at it, we realized maybe it wasn't that simple. Molly, anything you want to share there on that journey?
Yeah, for sure. And by the way, now that this project is shipped, we've joked that, Brad is now a full-time employee because his onboarding project is
I made it.
How many months? So when we first started planning out this project, we were really thinking, it might be a day or two of work. And the reason why Brad's onboarding took so long was, that was not the case. And the biggest reason actually was on the engineering side. So the way that our system is architected, it really assumes that any activity, it's a one-to-one. It's an activity on the board, and that's what clients see. That's what's used in credit card authorization. That's used everywhere. It's a single activity. And so when we thought about this project, actually, we had to support a new architecture that really allows for an activity that's, a parent activity, if you will. So a single activity that has a sub-activity that can still be moved around the board, but is still kind of the same activity for the purposes of editing that activity, for credit card authorization, for pricing, for all of the things that matter there, but it can still be reflected on the itinerary as a separate checkout event. So that was really the most complex part. And then when it came to just testing and getting the details right, there's things like you don't want them to be able to drag the checkout before the check-in, right? That doesn't make sense. Or if we know it's a 4-night stay and you drag the initial event forward, that checkout should extend as well. So it's still a 4-night stay. So things like that, getting those details right, which we really try to do, also matter a lot.
And I think this is such a cool example of just how special I think our like engineering and really the entire R&D team. I mean, Molly and Brad just doing a ton of work on those details and thinking through that kind of user experience, and then handing it over to the eng team, who basically restructured in a week the entire data model for how we think about lodging, backfilled all the data into this new data model. And I bet that if you're a user listening to this, you had absolutely no idea that we just changed the fund. It'd be like almost taking a house, rebuilding the entire foundation underneath the house, and you never knew that there was even a construction worker there, right? Like that's basically what just happened this week. And so it's pretty cool. Maybe a question, Molly, for you. I know in the Facebook group, I think in our new feedback tool, which we'll talk about in a minute, like we've been getting kind of questions around like, well, what about transfers? What about flights? What about like, is this going to come to every activity? How do we think about kind of prioritizing that? Like what are your thoughts on that?
Great question. So the good news is the way that we've done the architecture will make this easier to do for other types of activities. And we know flight legs is the other top ask. So when we initially planned out this project, it was lodging and flight legs, top pain points in the project, in our pipeline. So we are doing flight legs actually as we speak. That should be live hopefully in my product update for next week. Other activity types, while we've made it easier, it still is additional work that we would have to prioritize as a project. So again, just like anything else, we're going to look at those things against all of our other priorities. a plug later in the conversation for Cani to actually, if you're interested in other activity types, to submit your feedback there. That will really help us out. But the short answer is we're not going to prioritize other activity types near term, but we certainly will as we see they matter for the amount of time it takes to build.
Love it. And definitely a plug for Cani, which we'll talk about how you can give feedback if those are the top things you want us to look at, how you can give us that feedback in just a minute. But I want to transition now to this idea of communities. This is actually something else that we've shipped, and communities is part of this broader collaboration. We just had a board meeting on 2 days ago, Wednesday, I guess it was. And this was one of the big updates where we think this is a kind of major milestone in just the Tern development. Historically, if you've been a Tern user, it's kind of been a solo player experience. You have your library, you have your content, you have your trips. But if you look at what the kind of travel planning experience is, it's actually much more multiplayer, right? You're working with assistants, you're sharing content. There's Facebook groups and communities with all these things that are being shared. You're working with these third parties. Like, planning travel really is a team sport. And with these new features, it's our first kind of big step towards enabling that level of kind of collaboration and community in Tern. So really, really excited about this. Molly, do you want to just bring to life a little bit, like what are these community and collaboration features in Tern today?
Yeah, so as of last week-ish, maybe the week before, you can officially share any Tern library content in a variety of ways. So your trips, your trip templates, your activity templates, forms, workflows, all of that content that you've spent so much time carefully crafting, you can share them via a link. So if you want to post them to your socials or your Facebook communities, you can do that. You can share them with your agency. So if you are a part of an agency in Tern, with just a click, you can make those things accessible to all of the agency members. You can share them, and we love when you share them with the full Tern community. So if you have like a trip that you think would benefit any new advisor or existing advisor using Tern, that's been really special to see. People just out of the goodness of their hearts sharing their, carefully crafted activities and forms and tasks and automations. So that's been awesome. And then we built a special tool for library sharing where you can create your own communities within Tern. And that lets you invite advisors who have Tern accounts into your community and share content with them specifically, which has been really cool to see people creating their own communities and sharing out content. And it's especially useful for a lot of our we have a lot of folks who craft kind of personalized content around Tern. So what are all of the various email templates that you should think about sending your clients? And they're crafted in a way that makes sense for how the Tern system works, or the workflows or what have you. And previously, the process for purchasing that kind of private content and then getting it into Tern was really manual. We heard stories of people crafting like these things over full weekends, carving out hours and hours of work for copy and pasting over the stuff that they had bought into Tern. And so now those folks can just create a community, share that content with their community, add new members to that community, and boom, with just as simple as that, they have access to all of that content that they've purchased. So we're really excited about that and have seen some cool traction there.
It's like so cool, like 50 pages of copy and pasting down to like put in an email address and boom, everything just shows up in the library. I mean, it's like so, and it I don't know, I just get so excited watching these communities. It's one of the things that blew us away at the first ASTA conference we went to, just how community centric this industry is, and watching that come to life in Tern, I think is really special. Pulled the numbers a couple of days ago and prepped for this, and we had over 1,300 pieces of content that had been shared across the different community levels, which is just so cool. And that is within like 2 weeks of this feature being live. So really excited about that. Brad, you became a bit of a celebrity with this feature, actually, having the first shared piece of content that I think is still the #1 copied thing.
It is.
Which is like, I mean, like, it's pretty impressive. Congrats on like getting in there and being the the first in and really just reaping the benefits of that now.
Yeah, not to brag, but 154 people have copied my template. So yeah, I think it's pretty popular. I don't think that
I'm
also
jealous.
includes if you just pull it directly into your trip. So, it's probably like underappreciating how valuable my content is.
That's fair.
But yeah, for people who haven't seen it, go to the library, look for a guide for downloading the Tern mobile app. Just pull it into your trip, and it's really easy to share with all of your travelers, like anyone who's going on the trip. Hey, Tern has a mobile app that's really valuable for you. It's got some basic details in there about how to find it, links, and then a little bit of selling just to make sure that your clients and your travelers are set up to have their Tern trip on the go. So that's been really cool to see how much people love my stuff, but also I've been blown away by how much, again, people are engaging with other content that folks are sharing. Seen a ton of city guides that are popping up in Tern, and I think people are just sharing their expertise about places they know and making sure that other advisors can quickly pull in that content. We're also seeing a lot of guides for different cruise lines, just if you're selling Norwegian cruises, here's the basic details every traveler should have when they're going on their trip, like where to download the Norwegian app or different pieces like that. And we're also seeing a bunch of Disney content, which we know people on Tern love. And that's kind of cool to see as well.
It's one of the pieces of feedback that we get as we talk to advisors who have made the switch to Tern is that this can feel a little overwhelming at first. And this was especially true before any of these collaborations. It's like I come in, brand new system. How do I move everything over? How do I get everything set up? And this, I think, really changes that. Instead of having to create everything yourself, you can come in, you can find the best practice that advisors have shared on what does a new trip request form look like. You can find the best practice for hey, here's some templates of trips and how you can really craft a stunning itinerary. Here are some email templates and workflow automations that have been shared that you don't have to recreate yourself. And so if you're feeling a little less tech savvy, you can just take what somebody else has shared with the community and start to implement it in your business. So really, really cool to see how this is helping people make the transition, level up the business, save time. I want to be sensitive of our time. We said we were going to try and keep this to 25, 30 minutes at the most. So maybe Molly, kind of closing thoughts on what the future of this kind of collaboration world looks like and where this is going in Tern before we move on to our last topic.
Okay, it's gonna be hard to keep this short, so I'll kind of cut myself short here, but really on the advisor side, anything in real life that you would do to collaborate on trips, on your contacts, on tasks with your VAs, with your colleagues, with your agency members, we want to enable that in Tern. So trip planning, everything, eventually you'll be able to work with your colleagues in Tern seamlessly using our system. So we're really excited about that. But it doesn't just stop with advisors. So you can also imagine your travelers, being able to let them add special things to their itinerary if they plan on, doing some of that themselves, if that's something that you'd like to enable, or maybe assigning a task to a traveler if you need them to take care of something, for example. And then there's also another side of this ecosystem, which is suppliers, DMCs, tour operators, folks you're working with there. Instead of, again, having to do a lot of the manual copy paste and going back and forth with them outside of the system, imagine if these suppliers were using Tern and actually building these things out with you directly themselves. So I'll kind of stop there. There's a lot of exciting things in the future for collaboration.
And I'm sure this will not be the last time we talk about it. And I think I'm excited to end the world of collaboration by PDF, which I think is what powers a lot of the travel industry today. There's just so much opportunity to really to build something special that helps connect everybody in the ecosystem. I want to transition now to our last topic, just in the interest of time, and that is this kind of feedback tool. And this is something, even go back to what we talked about at the very beginning, that's incredibly important to Tern. We've known and said from the beginning that we know how to build great technology, and we rely on everybody in this industry helping us understand what the things that we should be building are, what are the problems that we should be solving are. And so we've had tools in Tern since the beginning for people who are using the system to give us feedback really quickly. We used to use a tool called Marker, where you could literally just you'd have a share feedback button on the right-hand side of the screen. Any page you're at, you just click that button and it goes right into our product tracking system. As we've grown really quickly, that started to get a little overwhelming. People, multiple times a week would be submitting the same idea. There's no visibility into like what these, kind of shared requests were. The data management from our perspective was kind of a nightmare. And so we're really excited to be kind of launching this new feature. And we'll talk about that in a minute. Before we do that, Molly, Brad, anything you want to share on kind of the old way of doing things, and anything we want to share about kind of what's exciting to come?
I think you covered it well. Honestly, it was amazing, but until it wasn't, right? It just hit a level of scale and duplicate entries where I think the ability to upvote and see signal that way is just going to be a game changer. So I think you covered most of the stuff on my mind. Yeah.
And this is like us learning how to do a podcast in real time. I'm like looking at the notes and I'm like, oh, I was supposed to ask Molly that question. But here we are. Here we are. We just talked about it. So we're excited to be launching a new tool, feedback.tern.travel. And I'll actually kind of pull it up here I'm going to try sharing my screen. We'll see if this actually works. And so we'll go here and we'll share this. So one of the cool things that you can actually start to see in Tern, this is where, by the way, you find that library sharing. So this is, you can see shared with me, the Tern community, all that content that we just talked about is available here. And if you been a Tern user for a while, you got used to this kind of blue submit feedback item on the right-hand side. That has now gone away. And there's two new ways that you can submit feedback directly in Tern. One is by clicking on the chat here and saying, make a feature request right from here. And that's going to bring you up into this kind of in-app experience where you can start to see some of these pieces. You can click on this blue plus icon to submit a request. But what you can also do is that we've updated this tab to say help instead of learn. And now if you go under here, you can actually click on submit feedback. And what that will do is it's going to bring you into the kind of feedback section. And it's probably not showing because of the way that I shared. So let me try this one more time. And what that will bring you to is our brand new tool powered by a company called Cani, which gives a lot more visibility into the roadmap. So when you come in here, you'll be able to see kind of all these different things that people have submitted. You can upvote them just by clicking on up. You can start to see planned. And what I'm really excited about is it's going to give us the ability to better communicate with the community on how these things have changed. You can click on feedback to get more details. You can comment on these. So if you click in on add e-signatures, you can see it's top requested thing. Good news, like we plan on doing this, and you can see the comments that are associated with that. So really excited about this kind of new way of kind of collecting feedback. And the way that we found this in the first place was I was on a call with a user and they were describing how this other company used this and how magical it was for them to see what other people are doing, to submit an idea and have that idea actually be shipped. And I'm thinking to myself, like, we do that every single week. We're responding to user feedback. And how do we help connect that loop for more people? And how do we help make sure that we're communicating the updates and the way that we're listening in a better way? So really excited about this. But I do want to make sure that we have a couple minutes just to talk about how we'll use this, right? And so maybe, Molly, a question for you. What should the expectations be for folks? Like, is anything that going to get put in their vote? Are we guaranteed to build like the most voted up thing? Like how will this factor into kind of our approach to building product?
Yeah, so to directly answer your question, no, the expectation shouldn't be that every single thing that goes in there we exactly build, especially like exactly how it's requested. It's going to be one really important input to our overall planning process. And just to bring this to life a little bit, there could be a top voted feature that we actually are planning on covering, but in a bigger project that's already slated at a certain point in our roadmap. So that's a great input to know to make sure we're really covering it within that project. But we may not do it as kind of a one-off feature request ahead of that. Another example is something like group travel that people know, group travel is coming. So they're not necessarily putting that in as the most, top upvoted feature, but we know this matters a lot to you and it's on our roadmap and we're going to build it. And then maybe just two more quick examples here. There could be things that people request and we totally understand and it helps us kind of understand the use case and what you're looking for and what the gap is in Tern. But maybe the exact kind of suggestion doesn't align with our philosophy or how we believe the system should work long term. So we'll still use that as an input to understand kind of what our users care about, but we may not implement it in exactly the way that it's being requested. And then the final thing is we like to surprise and delight. There are things that we believe will be game changers in the system that may not be the, top voted things. Like imagine, a world of being able to type in a few things in AI and have it build out an itinerary for you, things like that. So, we do always want to make sure that we're thinking strategically about what we know matters to our users and building our roadmap out accordingly. So one very helpful input to that, but not kind of the end of our planning process. Yeah.
Perfect. Brad, any thoughts that you have or want to share on Cani before we do our last kind of wrap up lightning round segment, which we'll name at some point?
Love it. Yeah, I mean, my thoughts so far are just like I'm already blown away by the engagement in Cani, and peek behind the curtain as I was just like having breakfast this morning. What I was doing instead of my normal scrolling on whatever apps I was on, I was scrolling Cani and like reading all of the feedback. And yeah, I'm really excited to see everyone engage there. I'm also really excited to see how we can incorporate it more into the design process. Like some of these, you could imagine some of these feature requests, we come back with like, hey, here's how we're thinking about this. Like just to give you a peek behind the curtain as we're working on it, might request some, like user interviews and types of things there where people want to give more feedback. We could engage in that way. So I think there's a lot of opportunity there, and already excited to see how much traction it's gained.
Awesome. I may have to incorporate that into my breakfast ritual. That sounds like a good way to start the day. All right, round robin, wrapping up here. What are people most excited about? Like coming up, we've got a new week starting on Monday. What are you going into next week most excited about? And anybody want to volunteer to start?
How much are we allowed to share? Oh, let's
share it all.
All right, go ahead, Molly.
This is a really hard question because I was going between like 4 different things, but I think I'm most excited for the agency webinar and the fact that as of this week, our agency product is officially out of beta. Now, that doesn't mean we don't have a lot of things that we know we need to build and layer on, but it's just a really exciting milestone that anyone who creates an agency today, they'll see commission, they'll see reporting, they'll be able to access these tools, and we get to talk all about it on the webinar next week.
So excited for that. We'll put the details of that in the show notes once we figure out how to add show notes.
We're experts.
Yeah, we clearly know what we're doing with the podcast. Learning and growing is a big part of our values. So that's what we're doing right now, live on air. Yeah. Brad, what are you most excited about?
Yeah, I'm most excited about starting to roll out flight updates and notifications. This is a piece of UI that I'm really proud of. I think it looks really nice, and it's something that we like put a little more craft into than some other projects. So we know that it is needs to be super clear. When's your flight actually taking off? What gate, what terminal do you need to be at? So we're adding a bunch of new details there, and I think it looks pretty sick. So really excited to get that out. And I've been working with an engineer, just like getting all the little details right, and excited to see the reaction.
Yeah, I literally right before this actually saw Spencer post like the flight. He's one of the engineers who's working on this, and posted the UI that Brad had designed, and I was just like, woof, that is like very slick. And this is another one of those projects we could spend another half hour on, like why it's way more complicated than you'd think around like all the different notifications and the difference between a departure delay and an arrival delay, and how do you show those? So like huge kudos to Brad for figuring out how to make that mess of update data really beautiful. I'll echo what Molly shared, and like I think these updates that we have coming up, we've got 2 big webinars. One is the first week of August, I think August 7th, and one is next week on the agency side of things. And it's going to be so fun to be able to push out these kind of major updates on the agency side. Not only do we have the kind of commission and reconciliation, but kind of a look forward on how we'll make it easy for agencies to manage their kind of majority, if not all of their back office through Tern, and really eliminating things like sales reports and this kind of manual, arduous process. Like so excited to get that out into the wild. And then looking ahead, it's not necessarily just next week, but all these improvements that we have to the overall client experience, which I think is something that we care a lot about and that our advisor partners care a lot about. It's like, how do we surprise and delight our clients? How do we deliver that 5-star service? And we think that the tech that advisors use plays a big role in enabling that. So features like flight stats, features that we will talk more about in the future are playing a big role in that. So with that, that concludes our first ever Tern Flight Path podcast. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. And we will see you next week. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.